Okay. Hello, I see people joining us, and we're just about at time. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes here and give people a chance, and I'm going to stir my tea. All right, getting close to 12 o'clock. So 9 o'clock on the West Coast, 12 o'clock on the East Coast. For those of you who are joining, we're just about ready to get started. So thanks for spending time with me this morning. This is my welcome to my monthly AMA, Ask Me Anything session. I do these sessions as, frankly, an opportunity just to become available to folks who might have questions for me or perspectives or things they'd like to hear about or learn. I find it difficult to do one-on-ones with everyone that might want to have a conversation. And I've also found that a lot of times questions that one person has, other people actually have too. So it's a great opportunity just to learn, frankly, from each other and engage in a dialogue. So thanks for taking time out of your day to actually join me. And we're just about ready. Here we go. Welcome, Tracy Lynn. I see your message in the text box. Glad you could join today. All right. So we're now a minute after 12, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and those who join can just catch up. So, as you know, I accept questions in advance, so I'll go through those first. And then if you have questions for me, I'll also keep my eye on the chat. Feel free to ask me anything that comes to mind or something that you'd like to know as we go through our Q&A session. Hey, Bob. Thanks for joining as well. All right. So, number one, let me pull it up. Here's the question. I'm a scientist with a PhD who wants to become an executive leader, C-level, in a Fortune 500 company in the future. I recently got asked to go from R&D manager to product manager in marketing. Would this be a good career shift? Is marketing experience needed for my career progression? Well, frankly, a lot of it depends on what kind of job. You left it really open to say you just want an executive leadership job. So yes, there are executive leadership jobs in marketing. There are executive leadership jobs in all kinds of areas, including research, depending upon the industry. So one of the questions to ask yourself as you think about this job is, what is the category, right? Or the segment that you actually want to build your skill set in. So if you want to be an executive leader in the research category, for instance, then I would look to see who are the executive leaders in research. And frankly, to get the C-suite in research, you have to be in a few particular industries, meaning I don't see many executives in the C-suite for research in like telecom industries or in retail industries, right? But they absolutely exist in pharmaceutical industries. They might exist in oil and gas, right? I'm not sure. So do your research. You want to first align yourself with the industry that maps to having the jobs that you want in the areas or arenas that you want. So if you like R&D, then pick an industry that really values and cares about R&D and has leadership positions there. If it doesn't matter to you what category you're actually rising in, then you probably want to go after something that's more general management oriented. And then it's actually helpful to have a broad base of experiences. So yes, marketing helps, research helps, sales helps, operational, finance, right? All those things. So as I always tell people, think about what is the prize? What is the goal that you're going after? And then work backwards versus starting from, hey, there's a bunch of different jobs. Which one should I take? Because there are many different paths. So hopefully that gives you some help and perspective. All right, next. Had a meeting with my CEO to talk about my progress in the company in title, salary, and work. He said there's lots of room for movement. Hmm. How do I hold him accountable? Ensure this discussion wasn't just lip service. When you have conversations with whether it's the CEO or anyone that's above you in your management chain to talk about career opportunities, it's wonderful to hear when they tell you, yes, you have plenty of opportunities. There's lots of things that you can do. That's great. But frankly, there's nothing for you to actually do with that information. So, what you want to do when you have the conversation is to make sure you actually drive to something specific. For instance, if like I'll put myself in this person's shoes. I've had the conversation to say, "Hey, I want to move forward. I'm doing a good job." They agree I'm doing a job, and they agree there's plenty of opportunity in front of me. Wonderful, but don't let it stop there. I would ask them, "Is there a specific next step that you think makes the most sense for me?" Right? That causes them to have to actually think about it a little bit. Is there a specific next step, right, that you think is best for me? Now it causes them to think through what that next role might be. Then you can have a conversation about that role. And when they mention the role, you can talk about timeline. Wonderful. That sounds like a very interesting role. Is that something that's reasonable to think that I might be able to get in the next year, right? In the next 6 months, 2 years, whatever might be appropriate. I don't know your background, how long you've been in the current job, all those things. But when people give you broad platitudes, always work to try to bring it down more specific. So when they say there's lots of opportunity, great, right? What next step do you think makes sense? Or what division, right, or group should I be targeting, right, as I'm working towards something? So always ask them. Now, again, you want to keep the tone professional. You want to keep the tone nice and easy. You hear how I'm saying it. You don't want to make it demanding. You don't want to make it confrontational, right, etc. What you're trying to do is to get them to suddenly become part of your team, right? Part of your team. Because once they tell you what they think you should do and you show that you're actually going to go after it, they'll feel a little bit responsible, right, for what you're doing and where you're going. So always try to get to some type of specifics. And if they dodge that, well, what next step? And it might be the CEO might say, because I don't know how many levels below the CEO you are reporting, but the CEO might say, well, frankly, I'm not sure the exact next step, right? Okay, fine. Then instead, if they're not quite sure, right, you can say, well, given that I'm trying to become and then fill in the blank, the chief marketing officer, right, the head of engineering, what the head of compliance, whatever it might be, and given what roles I've had, what next experiences do you think would be helpful, right, as I build my career? So you can, again, broaden it out, but try to get something specific. Uh, so hopefully that helps. And once you get that, make sure you talk about timeline and timeframes to set your own expectations, right? Always make this for you, not trying to make them make a commitment for them, but just, help me understand what a reasonable expectation is as I'm working towards this. I've found that most times people are comfortable with that and that they will actually answer and give you some perspective. And they see that as someone who actually has a lot of ambition. And you know what? As I always say, and as my book says, it's fine to be ambitious, right? Fine to be ambitious. Okay, next. How can a recent graduate get a chance to prove that they are able to do a job if organizations deem them inexperienced and therefore not getting an opportunity for those better jobs to kickstart their career? So, a lot of companies have entry level jobs. Entry level jobs, by definition, are designed for people who are right out of school or first job, right into the workforce. Why do they have them? Because they realize that, yes, you have a lot of raw capability, but you don't really have skills yet. So they need to actually give you a chance to build those skills, get the experience, etc. So when you're a fresh graduate, look for those entry level jobs. And once you get one of those entry level jobs, then you can start to prove yourself by actually exceeding expectations in the role. And as you start to exceed expectations in the role, you can start to ask for more responsibility, more opportunity, more exposure, right? Whatever it might be. So, no, you're probably not going to come right out of college and suddenly be managing a division, right? So, you need to have your own expectations set as well. But frankly, I've found that if you're good at what you do. You show that you work hard, you get your commitments done, people can count on you, etc. People want to give you more responsibility, and they want to see you actually succeed. So don't be afraid in terms of rolling up your sleeves and really making a difference. And don't be afraid of that, first entry level job. Everybody starts someplace. So that's perfectly okay. But let me just share something else, because this is something I wasn't told when I started in the workforce, and I learned later, but I wish I'd known right in the beginning. People don't know what you do. Even though they might work in your same building, in your same department even, et cetera, everyone's busy. So they don't know exactly what you do. They know you're in marketing, or they know you're in sales, or you're in engineering, right? They know what group, et cetera, but they don't really know what your skills are. So make sure you're letting people know what you actually do. And I don't mean walking around saying, okay, everybody, look at me. Here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm doing, right? No, nobody wants to work with those kind of people. But take the opportunity when people give you a chance. Folks ask in our culture all the time, so how are you? What are you doing? How's it going, right? And what do we say? Hey, I'm fine. It's going well. Good, right? No. Take the opportunity to give more than just a one-word answer. When people say, hey, how are you doing? Tell them what you're doing. Shellye, how are you doing? Hey, I'm doing really well. I'm excited. I just got a deal closed that I've been working on for 2 months, right? Shellye, how are you doing? Oh my gosh, I'm kind of exhausted. I just spent the last 2 weeks working on this proposal to try to change how we actually handle our payroll system, right? Shellye, how are you doing, right? Just tell them. Again, 30 seconds, not a long 10-minute, right? But 30 seconds. Why? Because when you do that, they get a chance to actually understand your skills. They get a chance to see that you're actually energetic, that you've got a lot of things going on, right? It gives people an impression that then is helpful in helping you build your reputation at work. All right. Okay, any comments here? Oh, good. Glad you like the point. And listen, if questions come up, please pop them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going through the ones that came in advance. What guidance do you have for an ambitious person starting a new job in a fast-growing industry? Well, first of all, I always think it's a good idea to start your job in a fast-growing industry, because industries that are growing have companies that are growing, and companies that are growing never have enough resources. So there's typically lots of opportunity to take on more responsibility. So what's my number one advice? Make sure you are exceeding expectations. Exceed expectations. Now, in order to exceed expectations, you need to know what expectations are. And while that might seem very obvious, I found that a lot of people actually don't take the time to try to understand what's actually expected of them. And I don't mean the job description, because trust me, after 40 years in business, it is rare that how you are evaluated in terms of performance equals the job description. So it's really important that you ask your boss, your supervisor, etc., when you start a role, right? Or at the beginning of each year, just ask them, so what does success look like to you? Right? And the reason you want to ask that question is you want to hear the things that are unwritten, the things that are unsaid about what expectations are, so that you can actually exceed them. Because it's when you exceed expectations that you really get the opportunity to then get to the next level of responsibility. So exceeding expectations are about managing expectations, which means you have to know what the expectations are. So whether it is your boss, or you're joining a new team, or whatever it happens to be, always make sure that you understand, hey, what does success look like? At the end of this year, right? What are you looking for to say, job well done, right? When we finish this project, what are the outcomes, right, that we're expecting? Always, always, always make sure you are crystal clear on what success looks like. Because if you are, then you know how to prioritize your time and how to get things done. And one quick thing on that one. I learned this the hard way. Let me give you an example about prioritizing time. I was given a project, and here I was. I was only, in this particular job, I was maybe in the job like 4 months. All right, so I'm still working on, okay, want to do a good job, right? Want to impress people, and I'm still early in my career. And my boss asked me to take on this assignment, which was just extra work. But it was really categorizing and organizing for our team, basically our game plans for how we were going to achieve our objectives for the year and our numbers. So it was taking everybody's, I forgot what we call them, planning session work that they had done and putting it away to make it easily understood what the key milestones were, etc. All right. Well, I worked on this like night and day because this was the first, I call it, additional new project my boss had given me, and I wanted to really make a good impression. So I spent time on this, and I created this beautiful, presentation, da 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 da, right, to share all this stuff, and I did. And I took him through it and whatever, and he was blown away. He was kind of like, "Wow, Shellye, this is amazing." He said, "But frankly, I thought you were just going to put together a spreadsheet." Wow, a spreadsheet. If I had taken the time to ask him when he asked me to put this together, to understand expectations, well, what format do you want it in? Right? What are you looking for? How do you plan to use this? I could have just done a spreadsheet. It would have taken me probably a quarter of the time to do. So all that extra time I spent creating this beautiful presentation was basically time wasted because I went so far above that there was more, it wasn't even valuable. It was just above what I needed to do. So that was time that I could have been spent doing my other job, my actual work. So from that point on, I learned make sure I understand expectations when people ask me to do things. Don't just take an action and run with it. Make sure you understand what's expected. Okay, next. Are you a perfectionist? If so, how do you keep yourself from aiming for perfection so you're able to give yourself grace? Ha. Okay, so here's another lesson. I mean, trust me, I learned a lot of lessons. Um, I was given a new client. I started out IBM in sales. I was given a new customer. And this customer and I had a conversation, and I'm trying to find, opportunities for selling IBM equipment. And it turns out, he needs really a new back end system. He's having trouble with getting, all this work done in this particular division, right, of his company, et cetera. So I've got a solution. I've got software, I've got hardware, and I leave his office thinking, ooh, here's an opportunity. But new customer again, wanted to impress him. I wanted everything to be perfect, right? And so I worked on it and worked on it, worked on it. It took me, I don't know, probably about 10 days, right? I even ran it past some people so they could see, yes, it was good, right? Made a few tweaks. I finally get an appointment to see the customer again and to present my proposal. And so I present it. By the time I get the appointment, it's probably 2 weeks. So I come back, give him the proposal, and he's impressed. He said, "Wow, Shellye, this is good. It's cost justification. I'm all set, da da da." He said, "I just wish I had this a week ago." He said, "I just got my budget cut 4 days ago. And so I'm not going to be able to move forward this year." Ah, ah. What I learned in that was 100% done, perfect, and slow doesn't work. 80% fast is much, much better. So I try to always keep that in mind. 80% good and fast beats 100% perfect and slow every day of the week. Every day of the week. Because if you're 80% good, you always get the chance to tweak it a little more if you need to. But if you're late, your opportunity is over. It's over. So that's how I got myself out of this whole perfectionist mode, right? 80% good and fast beats 100% perfect and slow. That's my big message on that. So if you find yourself being a perfectionist, give yourself timelines. Give yourself timelines. And then once that timeline is hit, it's good enough. And you're going to put that first draft out there. And that's the way to look at it. Here's the first draft, right? And it's okay to even use that. What I started doing, even with clients, was to be able to have a meeting, say, listen, I wanted to be able to get back to you quickly and show you what we're framing up, right? And give it, and then I could learn in that conversation what areas needed to be improved or tweaked or more information, etc. But what I learned is it also then enabled me and the client to work together. So we were like a team versus me trying to sell something. And I've used that approach throughout my career, not just when I'm trying to sell something to a customer. So hopefully that helps. All right, next one. What is the greatest lesson you've learned? And what is the secret of your success? Bob, this is you. Big questions here. All right, so the greatest lesson I've learned, I mean, I share a lot. I don't know that I have a greatest. To me, life is just a series of lessons that we are always learning as we try to improve ourselves. So, a really important lesson was managing my calendar. Now, when I first got that advice, I really didn't understand it. I'm like, what do you mean manage my calendar? My calendar is controlled by a lot of other people. I'm invited to meetings and calls this. I mean, I'm pulled. I don't necessarily get a chance to manage my calendar. But when I thought about it, I realized that actually there's still a lot of time that I get to manage. And what I started doing was actually looking back on my calendar, because I write all my meetings down, looking back on my calendar and saying, does how I'm spending my time align with my priorities? And what I learned was many times it didn't, which means I've got to figure out a better way to spend my time. One of the few things that you actually do have control over is how you spend your time. And this is true professionally as well as personally. So, being very thoughtful and intentional about how you spend your time can really pay dividends as you are trying to build your life. Okay, next, what's the secret of my success? It's hard to decide. Being intentional, I think, is the number one secret of my success. I really work hard to do things for a reason. Do things for a reason. To keep my eye on where it is I'm trying to go, what is it I'm trying to do, what am I trying to make happen, to create, to build, to help, whatever it might be, and then intentionally take steps to make sure I'm heading in that direction. Now I'm going to take a message from the text over here, which says, what guidance do you have when resigning a role? Oh, good question, because that's something you're probably going to do a time or two, right, in your career. Number one, always be very professional. I don't care why you're resigning. I don't care if it was a toxic environment. I don't care if it was a bad manager. It doesn't matter. You control you. So always make sure it's professional. When I resign, I actually practice what I'm going to say, because you get nervous, right? You get nervous. So practice what you're going to say, and to walk in and to say, thank them, always thank them for the experience that you've had, the support that you had while operating. But unfortunately, I need to resign, right? And then it's up to you, because I don't know your circumstances, to figure out what you say in terms of why, right? If the why is, I'll give you examples. I resigned. I resigned from roles. My first resignation ended up not being accepted, and that they found me a new opportunity. My first resignation was IBM, and I literally went in to say, unfortunately, I'm resigning, and I'm resigning because you've told me there aren't opportunities for growth here based upon the circumstances that the company's in. And they were like, what? Wait. So I told them what it was. The next time I resigned because I told them I don't feel I have the opportunity to achieve the CEO role, which is what I'm striving for. And I don't think I've been paid fairly, and therefore I'm going to leave. So I tell people why I'm leaving when I'm leaving. Two reasons. One, when I left as an executive, I wanted the company to realize that they need to pay attention to what they're paying people and how they treat people if they really want to retain them. So that was why. But you decide if you're going to tell them why. You don't have to. That's up to you. But I find giving a reason, may not be all reasons, is helpful in terms of getting it done. But always be professional, always be direct, and practice what you're going to say so that you don't walk in being nervous or uncomfortable, because then it feels like something else, right, is going on. You want to leave a positive impression. Even though you're leaving, you want to leave on a professional note. Okay, next, let's see. Okay, no more questions there. So let me go back to the list. What steps can you take when you are starting virtually to ensure success? Okay, just because you're working virtually, don't think that suddenly that means you're removed right? Still act like you are part of the organization. So therefore, reach out to set up one-on-ones. It can be a 15-minute coffee chat, right? With people that you are now working with team members, with associates who might be in other groups, but you're going to need to interact with. Set up those one-on-one times. Because if you were in an office, you probably stop by somebody's office or desk and say, hi, I'm new on the team, blah, blah, blah. Do the same thing. You want to keep the same activities going, even if you have to do them virtually. Because out of sight, being out of mind is very, very true. So make sure that you are still engaging with people. The other thing is show energy. Show energy. Yes, you're virtual, but if I'm having a one-on-one Zoom, you don't want to sit there and I'm just sitting here. I'm going to be monotone and I'm going to just talk to you about what we're doing. No, you want to actually show some energy. You want to show that, hey, you have passion, right? You have it because you're coming across two-dimensional. So they can't see, they can't feel you, they can't, right? So you have to try to exude that through the screen so they get a full impression of who you are. So make sure you reach out to others. The other thing I always recommend is if you're trying to actually build and establish some of these relationships, when they have Zoom meetings, when you have a Zoom staff meeting or team meeting, whatever it might be, try to be the first one on. Because when you're in the first one on, you get to welcome everybody else, right? Oh, hey, Sue, we haven't had a chance to meet yet. I'm Shellye. I'm new to the team, blah, blah, blah. Oh, Tamika, da-da-da-da, right? All of a sudden, you can be like the greeter because you're the first one on. So virtual or in person, the things you need to do are the same. The techniques and the platforms you use may be different. If the company uses Slack or uses their own internal instant message, whatever it might happen to be, make sure you're engaging and you're visible. All right. Next, if you could do one thing over again, what would it be? This is a really hard question for me. And the reason it's hard is I'm a firm believer that one action causes the next action. And therefore, if I changed any decision or any job or any movement, whatever, throughout my career, I'd end up in a different place. Might be a better place, might be a worse place, but it would be a different place. And frankly, despite the fact that I've had many challenges and some tragedies, right? And all those kinds of things, both good times, bad times, I've had it all. I'm happy with where my life is today. So I wouldn't want to actually change anything. Now that said, were there a couple of lessons learned or things that were harder than I wish they had been? The answer is yeah. It was hard. I commuted for 3 years away from my family. My family was in Dallas, Texas, and I commuted to Silicon Valley for 3 years. That was hard. It was hard on me. It was hard on my family, right? It definitely caused some challenges just with regards to relationships with my daughter and son. And so was that hard? Yes. But I wish I didn't have to go through that. The answer is yes. But I don't think I'd end up where I was if I didn't, because then I wouldn't have taken a job in Silicon Valley. And therefore, I wouldn't have then become the CEO of a Silicon Valley company, right? And so I have a hard time saying not to do. I do believe that the hardships that we face actually help us to continue to build the character that represents who we are. And so we've got to go through them, got to live through them, through the pain sometimes, through the hard times. But as long as we learn from them and keep moving, then it's okay, right? Then it's okay. All right, question. What are you learning now, and what's the best book you've read recently? So what am I learning now? One of the areas that I'm definitely focused on is in my board work around how how companies handling the whole ESG arena. What are the right ways to actually measure this? What role should the board play versus the company play, right, et cetera. So I'm learning a lot right now around ESG. So that's definitely a learning area. And what's the best book I've read recently? It's not going to sound like a business book, but there's actually a lot of interesting lessons in it, and it's called Master of the Senate, and it's about Lyndon B. Johnson. It's not a new book, but it's one that I finally read. I'd heard a lot of good things about it, and it's really about leadership more than anything else, and how to get things done when things aren't necessarily set up for your success. So that's the most recent one. Okay. Well, everybody, let me look, see if I've actually hit all the questions here. Hold on a minute. My screen timed out. All right, that's it. I've answered all the questions that came in advance. And as I scroll through, I believe I've hit all the ones that came in through the chat. So thank you very much for joining me today. I wish everybody well. And remember, it's always, wait, here's a question. Just came in. Should there be a limit? Should there be a limited set of interviews I accept with one company? I've had up to 4 different panel interviews lasting up to 2 hours each with several team members. You know, every company's different. I know, I'm trying to think of the company. I interviewed with a company myself once, and I must have had 7 interviews. I mean, it's a lot of interviews. So I don't know that there's a limit. I don't think you should limit it. Each company has their own approach, and some like a lot of people involved, and some are comfortable with just a few people involved. So I don't think that's something that you can limit. If you're uncomfortable with the number of interviews you have, then you may be uncomfortable with the culture. So maybe the company's not the right fit. Something else came through. Um, Very nice to meet you. Well, thanks very much, Sylvia. Nice to meet you too. All right, everyone, I'm going to call it. Thanks very much for joining in today. Stay tuned. Follow me on my LinkedIn channel, and you'll get notification of the next one. But we'll be having another one in December and every month going forward. Let people know that I'm doing this. Happy to have more join. More the merrier. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a great day. All right. Bye-bye.